Right, welcome to episode 81 of How I Make Music, the behind the scenes editing process. I interview audio drama composers and then I chop up their interview material, all this pink stuff, all their voiceover stuff, and then I put interesting sound effects to it and I make it sound a bit more like a movie, less like a podcast and more like a movie for your ears. Right now, I've done the boring sort of intro work of cutting out the usable audio and dividing it into regions, which is based on, well, the regions are based on our interview material. That's the chat that we had. So there's some order to it, and then along the way, I've make these yellow markers, which are ideas for audio playback. This guy's name is Stephen Poon. Stephen Poon is a music composer for a podcast called Unwell, a Midwestern gothic horror. It was just a dark podcast, audio fiction. So right now I'm busy putting together. I'm doing another pass of the audio and coming up with more ideas on where to create these moments, these sound effects moments. So for example, here we could include the sound effects of a horse and a car driving based on what he's saying, like here.
Like it's kind of anathema. When I'm driving to Columbus or Cincinnati, there's some stops where you might actually run into a horse and buggy.
Little idea there, little horse sound.
And so that was really the first thing I thought of rural Ohio is really no technology. In fact, rural Ohio technology. In fact, no technology.
G.
Okay,
now I gotta cut off the N.
No technology.
Just a little bit more.
Technology.
Okay, that's fine for now.
Like I'll get gas, look down the road, oh, there's a horse and buggy. It's really not common, but that was my first thought
Okay, that's fine.
About this set. When sometimes when I'm visiting family in Ohio, it's not common, but you might run into a horse and buggy on the road. There are some religious communities that don't make use of modern technology. So it was really at the forefront of my mind going, don't make use of, that was really the first thing.
Right, I think I've got an idea here.
That was don't make use of modern technology.
There are some communities that don't make use of modern technology. Let's put that before, so we don't need that. Move that before there. So
where you might actually run into a horse and buggy.
Sound effect. And then
there are some religious communities that don't make use of modern technology.
So that was my first thought.
And so that was really the first thing I thought of rural Ohio is really no technology. Ohio is really no technology.
That's fine.
Ohio.
Rural Ohio, fine. Maybe the point has been made.
Really at the forefront of my mind going into this setting to not include a lot of synth and digitized music.
Yeah, that's even better because the point he's trying to make here is that he wanted to create music which sounded like rural Ohio, so it's inappropriate to use technological instruments like synthesizers and whatever.
Technology. So it was really at the forefront of my mind going into this setting to not include a lot of synth and digitized music.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, and it's really the idea.
Now what I'm going to do is just take the playback rate up to save time, 1.6.
Yeah, and it's really the idea of, the people also are musicians here, right? You have there's a huge part of season 1 where there's a jingle writing contest, and so characters in the show and not even side characters, but other people who exist in the show are writing music and playing music. So we were writing a bunch of different jingles of different genres, did barbershop quartet, folk, punk rock, all what have you. And so knowing that other people here, they're not necessarily good musicians, but it's still an important part of this community.
Now I've got that here.
So when season 1 of Unwell was being put together, we knew what songs we wanted to include for the entire season. So I had a spreadsheet of a dozen different songs, including an episode with a celery festival that has a jingle writing contest.
Okay, so he's repeated that here. Where is it?
Before the Unwell. One of the more unique things about this track for me, and sometimes the best, and part of season 1 where there's a jingle writing contest.
Okay, so cool. You can take that out and stick it in the jingle writing contest. region. Cool. Moving forward. So what I'm trying to do here is just basically cut out anything that's not going to be used in the final edit, and make make notes along the way of which sounds to use in the background while he's speaking.
Yeah, it was really creatively satisfying, and sometimes the best creative music and art comes from those restrictions. Okay, I know I have to write this, or I know I have to write something in a genre, whatever that.
Okay, so I like that, and he speaks to that after the jingle writing contest. So that goes there. Cool. Cleaning it up slowly. Now that gives us this big gap here, so I can literally just cut that all.
I'm going into the setting to not include a lot of synth and digitized music.
And that's the end of that point. A pause or some kind of sound effect, some kind of palette cleanser, a breaker.
One of the more unique things about this track for me is there are loads of real actual instruments in the track. I've been far more used to real actual instruments. There are loads of real actual instruments in the track. I've been far more used to sequencing music, and to be able to go into the studio with half a dozen musicians was really rewarding.
So that goes in line with what he was saying there. No synths equals live instruments. Next.
Before the Unwell podcast, I was doing almost purely synth with the previous project with Jeffrey, Our Fair City. So that was 7.5 seasons basically of sequencing, playing around with a lot of samples. So when we started this project, I knew going in, okay, the setting in the middle of rural Ohio, I'm also from Ohio, we can't do this. Even if I have really good samples, I don't want to use like a violin sample. Piano's kind of where I mainly want to go. Mm-hmm. And if the script calls for it, I did some tracks with synth, but it was squarely in like the idea of you're listening to Muzak, where it's supposed to sound a little synthy.
Okay, so that is all just a repetition of what he said, and we've made the point. Let's move on. So now we're getting into the section called live instruments. I'm just gonna double check that the stream is going. Yeah, it looks like it is. Very cool. Not a lot of offset either. Cool. So we're moving into this next section, which I've called live instruments. This is where the subject is talking about the importance of using live instruments to create the sound he was aiming for.
Listen to this. Take a listen to this.
Okay, what is it?
Do you recognize it? It's not a guitar. It's not a mandolin. It's a charango.
Okay, so now at this point I'm going to start actually implementing the sounds that he has sent to me. Oh damn, I've just realized something. Okay, it's fine, I'll fix that later. Right, the Unwell theme, he has included charango. So let's get the charango. And all of this stuff is actually labeled incorrectly. This is from the previous contributor where I just duplicated the template, so we don't need any of that. Okay. So now at this point we want to get all of the separates in. In fact, we're going to need to double up on some of these. So now all these purple tracks go to a master music bus, and what I do is I use the stems he's provided me and I sync them up. So I even needed more than that. Let's just purplize those. Purplification, I think it's that one. Okay, it doesn't matter. All of them, I've got a shortcut for this actually. Set tracks to custom color. Let's make them yellow today. All right. Yeah, so these are the tracks all synced up. We're going to group them with G. So now when I grab one and move it, they all move. They're all synced up, but the problem is there's two of everything. We're still on playback 1.6, so let's take that back. The first thing is they're peaking, so I need to just bring that volume down. I'm going to take it down uniformly by 9 dB. Here we go. Cool. And this one, same part, different microphones. So he's got two microphones for each of these separate stems. So what I'm going to do is use the more obvious one. I'm going to use the more obvious one. We don't need both mics. It also just makes editing more difficult. Stephen Neck and Stephen Body. So I'm going to use all the ones called Body. I'm going to delete all the ones called mute, all the ones called Neck, so that we don't have volume amplitude problems where it comes out too loud or whatever. Right, so I think that's it. Just those two instruments. Right, let's get back to the editing. What he's doing is...
was really rewarding.
it was really rewarding to use live instruments. Now we get into the section where he says, do you know what that is? It's not a guitar, it's a charango. So I'm going to play back the charango at this moment only, meaning that here's how I do this generally. Let's just go ahead and mute everything except the charango.
With half a dozen musicians was really rewarding.
There we go. Let's use that little intro line as the...
Was really rewarding. Take a listen to this. Do you recognize it? Really rewarding.
Take a listen to this.
Take a listen to this. Do you recognize it? Do you recognize it? It's not a guitar. It's not a mandolin. It's a charango.
I think I need to dip these down even more in volume, seeing as we're still competing with the vocals.
Do you recognize it? It's not a guitar. It's not a mandolin. It's a charango.
The charango.
A charango is a Peruvian stringed instrument. It's 10-stringed, and traditionally it was made from an armadillo.
Let's go over to Free Music Archive, Free Sound Archive, and see if there's anything that sounds like a charango in the Creative Commons section. It's nice, but a bit too much background. No. Charango hiss and day and loop. That's very loud. Okay, so it looks like charango improv is still the best one. Very quiet. Let's use that. Now I download it. I also make a note of where it's from, and then I add that note to what is this? It's a charango. Take a listen to this. So now I go charango, and I make a note of where I found it for the notes. Cool. So that means we've now got the charango, which I'm going to just... the download time from Free Music Free Sound Archive can be a little bit slow. I'm going to keep editing in the meantime. Make a note here to add a charango. And I must actually make yellow the default color, so I don't have to do that every time. Okay, here we go.
Charango is a Peruvian stringed instrument. It's 10-stringed, and traditionally it was made from an armadillo shell until that was no longer made legal. Until that was made made illegal.
Okay, until that was made
illegal. Until that was made illegal. But this was made from an armadillo shell until...
Okay.
An armadillo shell.
It's not important to this podcast about legality.
But this was an instrument that I had found when I was in Peru for my honeymoon, and really took to it. I thought it was a beautiful sounding instrument. It's one of a number of instruments that we recorded live for the Unwell theme. This was... That
section there goes nicely sooner because it explains to us why we're hearing about a charango.
It's a charango.
It's a charango.
It's one of a number of instruments that we recorded live for the Unwell theme. The charango is a Peruvian stringed instrument. It's
we know what that is.
Armadillo shell. But this was an instrument that I had found was a beautiful sounding instrument.
Beautiful sounding instrument.
This was my first time meeting, recording, and...
Okay, now he goes into the actual recording process. But
when we went in, we didn't know exactly how long. Yes, we want to be very friendly with the editor and give them the freedom for my honeymoon, and really took to it. I thought it was a beautiful sounding instrument.
Okay, there's a section where he talks about walking into the shop, and I had some ideas there, but let's come back to that. for now and keep going?
This was my first time meeting.
Okay, now we're going to talk about the actual recording day. Well, actually, that's what he's saying now, even though it's not what's appropriate for right now. So I've got a section. Let's move straight on to the influences, because there's a format with this show that I want to try and retain. And what normally comes in now at about 3 minutes or 2 minutes is the influences. So we've got these three sections here: the Chieftains, Deadwood, and JRPG, which is role-playing games. Those are his three influences that he came up with. Yeah, cool. Still going. And then we can move on to recording day. So let's put that in there and come back to it. Cool.
My honeymoon, and really took to it. I thought it was a beautiful sounding instrument.
Okay, so moving the charango to ahead of the influences. So let's do the Chieftains first. First things first, we get the piece that he has suggested, which is a piece by the Chieftains. I haven't actually got it yet. It's, what did he say? Okay, the Chieftains doesn't really matter, so we're going to just find out some Chieftains. The Chieftains. We're going to look for some typical Irish jig music. Let's see, he said that was one of the main influences. So literally I'm just going to go onto YouTube and find... Okay, so Morning Dew is a piece that I know, which makes me a bit biased, but I... Doodly-doo. Cool. Yeah, okay, so we'll cut to the middle there where there's a fiddle. Cool, let's get that from... where's that site that does me download MP3 YouTube to MP3 converter? Cool. This is normally stuff I do beforehand and just haven't done it yet. Okay, in the meantime I want to include this WAV file, the Charango Improv. So I'm going to download that, kill the ad. Chieftains is downloading, also at a snail's pace. Let's go back to imported Charango sound. So now I've got a note that says Charango. I'm going to just stick that under there. Yeah, let's just stick it there. Now I actually want to make a new one because yeah, it doesn't actually need a name.
It's a charango.
The point of this is to have something playing in the background while speaking.
It's one of a number of instruments that we recorded live for the Unwell theme. A charango is a Peruvian stringed instrument. It's
a little bit of breathing space
for the Unwell theme.
Now what I'm doing is I'm timing the swell here, to the break in conversation.
It's one of a number of instruments that we recorded live for the Unwell theme. A charango is a
nice little swell there, and I'll add the reverb and all the necessary effects to that later. Let's first get to the end of this point and then bring in the Chieftains. So now I'll drag the Chieftains into imported and I make a note of, okay, it's the Chieftains Morning Dew, so I don't actually need to I know that piece. Good. Alright, so now it's pretty easy. Now that we've got that going, what I like to do is to start the playback slightly before the speaking. So we've actually we've switched a section here. So this is with editing, you want to create these beats, these kind of starts and ends. You want to announce them quite clearly, so it's not like this vague thing of like, what are we talking about? We've just finished talking about the charango. Now we're moving on to one of his listed influences, which is the Chieftains. So there's a pause.
I thought it was a beautiful sounding instrument.
There's a pause in the narration, and at which point I'm going to subtly bring even more subtly than that. We'll change the crossfade to a little bit smoother.
Beautiful sounding instrument. had a lot of influence when it comes.
Works nicely, and I do like this piece.
I've had a lot of influence when it comes to music over the years. So here's like a few things that came to mind as this track came together. First and foremost was the Chieftains. I really like.
Now, there's a musical moment where it resets. Listen to the music. 1, 2, 3.
I really like.
Because I know
Irish.
this track, I know that it starts here. So I'm going to time it so that you allow the listener to hear the musical downbeat. The downbeat is where the tension is released. It's the first note of a section, like an A section or a beat. And you don't want to rob your listener of that release. If I had moved the narration a little bit before the downbeat, it would sound like this.
I really like.
And then it sucks a little bit of the life. So there's theatrical timing involved here. Like, you need to be cognizant of what the music is doing and how that relates to the narration, is all I'm saying. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you
I really like.
talking. That makes much more sense.
I really like Irish session music. There's really this tone of.
Pause.
I really like Irish session music. There's really this tone of
A little bit of a pause there.
session music. There's really this
Downbeat
tone
is
of freedom and playfulness that comes from
Okay,
it.
he's got a little mouth click there. I want to remove that.
Tone of.
This is tone of what?
Tone of freedom. Freedom and play.
And then freedom.
Freedom and playfulness that comes from it.
And then we don't have to go much further than that. So that's just a little bit of Irish session music. Now, if we can segue that into Deadwood somehow. Is it who did the Deadwood soundtrack again? Let's check this out. Right. Deadwood. Oh wait, he's made notes for me on some of these. No, he hasn't. Okay. Deadwood OST. Okay. I'm going to try and I'm going to skip through these very quickly. No wait. Deadwood soundtrack. Why is all this other crap in here? I don't want that. I'm going to try to find something that suits the Chieftains, basically. Something that can be crossfaded from the Chieftains. I mean, this is already quite good. Arriving in Deadwood. Yeah, so that's good. I can hear the similarities between his selected piece and this piece, so there's no problem there. Only problem is it's a 10-minute track and I'm going to use 15 seconds of it, so I'm actually going to look for a shorter cut or a shorter version. That might be a little bit too country for me, but too hokey maybe. Now we've lost the thread. Let's try this one. Yeah. Only problem with this one is it's a little bit positive, but you know, honestly, at some points you just got to go, right, I don't have time to find the perfect one. Nope, that's not what I wanted to do. There we go. It's important. What's important here is just to show that there's instrumental overlap between his selected piece and the Deadwood main title theme. So we know that the music from this video is by David Schwartz, and the song is called Deadwood main title theme. So I'm going to add those here. These all go into the show notes on howimakemusic.com, so that I don't feel like a son of a bitch for using their music. Cool, Deadwood main title theme, so that now goes into here. This is it. You're at the forefront of the editing process. This is exactly how it works, kids. It's a combination of original music, non-original music, sound effects, the interview subject's narration, and the separate stems of his chosen track. Okay, let's try to get a nice crossfade. nice. Be better if it was slow. Yeah, that fade out's not doing it for me. Sometimes Reaper's onboard fade out doesn't really work, so I'm going to get more specific and use the volume automation lane to create a fade out that allows me to have a moment where this downbeat comes in while there's still a little bit of audio playing from Chieftains. Here we go.
Freedom and playfulness that comes from it.
That's a decent edit. Cool. Now the question is, what are we listening to? What are we listening to?
Was thinking of, we're thinking of the country. Sorry. I'm thinking of a rural, less populated place, and I had recently been watching Deadwood. So the Deadwood soundtrack by David Schwartz, that opening theme, is also in my mind.
Very lucky, because he did mention the opening theme later, so I might have picked the wrong one, but fortunately I picked the right one. Yay, I don't have to go re-download that. Okay, so the Deadwood theme, let's hear that one more time.
I'm thinking of a rural, less populated place, and I had recently been watching Deadwood. So the Deadwood...
We don't need the and.
I had recently been watching Deadwood. So the Deadwood soundtrack by David Schwartz, that opening theme, was also in my mind.
Opening theme, nice big break, was also nice big break.
It was also in my mind.
Music.
And I love, especially you hear this a lot in modern TV, when the credits play, they always like to punctuate at the end. But it's always this moment of a release of...
So I know what he was saying there, but I don't think it serves the moment. So we're going to cut that. Moving on. Japanese role-playing game soundtracks. Now, Stephen is a very big fan of Japanese role-playing games, so I had to kind of rein him in a little bit to ensure that he didn't go off the deep end. Fine, let's first just get to Twitch. Sorry, I'm looking for twitch.tv/howimake music. I forgot to just basically put out a share and say I'm streaming now. The dramatic editing of episode number 81 with Stephen. Did he have his name like that? No, I can't remember. Okay. Of How I Make Music, episode 1. Okay, that's fine. It's just a little shout out, just in case anyone's interested. Cool. No, you shut up. Go. Getting into a recursive time warp here. Okay. Cool. Good. Let's get the third influence track from his list of influences. Which, oh, now I remember, he sent it to me in the email. He sent it to me, not there. Stephen Poon, boom. That's all scheduling stuff. Come on, man. Yeah. I've downloaded most of that. I have actually downloaded this. Final Fantasy. I've downloaded this stuff already. It's called... There it is, Final Fantasy OST. Cool, I was just checking on the other window. Good, that's one more we've got. Now I can... He's given me 3, which doesn't actually help. He's, I know it's trying to be helpful to give someone options, but what you actually want to do when you're on a deadline like this is to reduce options. So it would be better if he had sent me just the one saying, use this piece demonstrates exactly what I'm trying to say, rather than making me hunt for something I can't predict, whatever his favorite song is. Okay, let's try this crossfade.
I've always had a lot of inspiration from specifically Japanese RPG soundtracks. To music from the late 80s or early 90s. There's not a lot of samples going into these songs. Very simple melodies that can very easily get stuck in your head. Because you're only working especially with the original Nintendo. There are only like 4 different samples that you could really fit in a cartridge. I don't really want to go too deep into this because it's not a common game. It's like literally a visual novel that's a spin-off of an RPG that was released in the 90s. We can get into that. I just feel like it might be a little obscure.
Okay, so he's mentioned a specific game, which means we have to actually use, I think this one, Sudoku. Suikoden, sorry, not Sudoku, Suikoden. Did I get it? No. Checking my downloads, and the answer is no, which means I do have to now go and find the piece that he wanted me to play. Withered Earth. No, wait. I do remember this, and it's called Suikoden Horizonte Collection. There it is. I have downloaded it. Yay for me! Awesome. Next, you gotta move at a frantic pace if you want to get things done around here. Cool. Deleting Final Fantasy. Suikoden is coming in, and this becomes the part he was talking about. Okay.
I've always had a lot of inspiration from specifically Japanese RPG soundtracks. To music from the late 80s or early 90s. There's not a lot of samples going into these songs. Very simple melodies that can very easily...
So that's good because it sounds a little bit more Irish. You can hear there's an Irish folk influence there, and that dovetails nicely with the Chieftains. So what I've got to do now is get Stephen Poon to record a pickup measure. I'm going to reply to this saying, this piece that we're hearing now, or just we're listening to the soundtrack from a game called Suikoden. And that's all we actually need, and we'll drop that in there. So we're going to get a yellow marker saying intro Suikoden. Okay. So now I know I've got to get hold of a little intro line saying this is Suikoden, and that will be good enough for that.
To that, I just feel like it might be a little obscure.
And then you just get him kind of laughing and saying, I'm a bit of an otaku, I'm nerding out about this game, and maybe it's a bit too deep for the podcast. A little light-hearted moment, and now we are out of the influencer section and into the recording day section. So this is where he describes meeting the musicians for the first time, and actually a little bit of anxiety around how's it going to turn out. And I wanted to turn this moment into an audio drama. So when they say walking into the studio, you use footsteps and you try to create the oral environment. Let's give it a quick listen. I'm going to double the speed, seeing as you can do that now.
It was my first time meeting, recording, and performing with all the instrumental performers on the Unwell theme.
Cool. And what happened?
When we went in, we didn't know exactly how long the track would need to be because we wanted to be very friendly with it. Jeffrey Nils Gardner was involved with this music and really all the music of Unwell too. I've known them for years. We originally met in Ohio while I was visiting mutual friends. And we met through other mutual friends in Chicago. We met twice, separate times. And when they were working on an older project, Our Fair City, there was...
Okay. So he's talking about his friend Jeffrey
involved
Gardner.
with this music and really all the music of Unwell too. I've known them for years. And when they were working on an older project, Our Fair City, there was no music. And I approached them and said, hey, would you like a theme song? And that was that show for 8 seasons. And then when Unwell started, it was kind of a natural progression of this collaboration. And it was really cool to finally do some work with Jeffrey that involved live music, and they could record. So back up, we were recording on a college campus because that's where Jeffrey.
Okay, so that's where the story starts. So actually, this section here is not the recording day; it is the introduction of Jeffrey Niels Gardner. So I'm just going to write there, Jeffrey. So it's important to just set that up because we mentioned Jeffrey for the rest of the episode, and I don't want listeners to feel like in the dark. Who's Jeffrey now? Jeffrey's just a nice bloke from down the road, isn't he? Yeah, nothing harmful about him. Okay, and then we get into recording day. I don't have any ideas for what to play under this section.
Was involved with this music and really all the music of Unwell too.
I met them twice through mutual friends, not important.
And when they were working on an older project, Our Fair City, there was no music. And I approached them and said,
so there we go.
Well, too. And when they were working on an older project, Our Fair City, there was no music. And I approached them and said, hey, would you like a theme song? And that was that. They did that show for 8 seasons. And then when Unwell started, it was kind of a natural progression of this collaboration. And it was really cool to finally do some work with Jeffrey that involved live music, and they could record, they could produce, and they could mix this song.
Cool. And that's a good segue because he ends up by saying live music, and now we're getting into recording day. So let's try to create an audio drama moment around this non-fictional interview material based on this selection of clips that I've highlighted, which tells the story of arriving at the studio, being a bit anxious, meeting the musicians, getting the recording going. That's kind of what we're going for here.
So back up, we were recording on a college campus because that's where Jeffrey was doing their master's at the time. Going into recording, I didn't know who was going to be there. I think I remember there being a list of musicians, but it hadn't really internalized before I got into the studio. So we recorded at a studio in Evanston, Illinois, and it was my first time in this space. And so walking in, we're setting up the studio before I got into the studio.
Yeah.
It was my first time in this space. And so walking in, we're setting up the studio, no one else is there. It's me, the recording engineer, we're wrangling cable, and I'm a little anxious. It was just anxious because there's a lot of unknown going into the studio like that. One thing that was really important for me was to make sure we got the tone of the song going into the studio like that. It was just anxious because there's a lot of unknown.
Because there's a lot of unknown.
Because there's a lot of unknown.
I was anxious.
I'm a little anxious because there's a lot of unknown going into the studio like that. I'm a little anxious because there's a lot of unknown. I'm a little anxious because there's a lot of unknown going into the studio like that.
Good, of course.
One thing that was really important for me was to make sure we got the tone of the song right. I didn't want it to be really too upbeat. I didn't want it to be too melancholy or the atmosphere of the small town, the unspoken, really too upbeat. I didn't want it to be tone of the song right. I didn't want it to be.
Okay, so let's focus on what you wanted. The atmosphere of a small town.
Of the song right. The atmosphere of the small town.
Good. And?
The unspoken things that you always get in that kind of small community.
The unspoken things you get. All right, so now we're getting to creepy territory.
This was my first time meeting, recording, and performing with all the instrumental performers on the Unwell theme. When we went in, we didn't know exactly how long the track would need to be because we were in early stages of production. So we recorded the song in sections, so it could be looped and extended to fit whatever needs to be.
Okay.
Yes, we want to be very friendly with the editor and give them the freedom to, extend and shorten as they want. So we really kind of went with. So I really kind of went in with the thought of like an Irish session where you have a bunch of musicians who come together in a pub. You don't know who's going to show up, but they all know.
Okay, I like that. Okay.
Recorded the song because we were in early stages of production. So we recorded the song in sections, so it could be looped.
Okay, so this section talks about how you can loop it.
When we went in, we didn't know exactly how long the track.
Okay, so this actually is more relevant.
We want to be very friendly with the editor and give them. And went in with the thought of like an Irish session where you have a bunch of musicians who come together in a pub.
So this actually relates more to the previous point. He didn't know anyone. Let's try again. Yeah.
This was my first time meeting, recording, and performing with all the instrumental performers on the Unwell theme. So I really kind of went in with the thought of like an Irish session where you have a bunch of musicians who come together in a pub. You don't know who's going to show up, but they all know the song and they're going to play it. There might be some free soloing. You really want to have a lot of fun with it and have that come through in the track.
Cool. Any mention of fun or happy is good because that's lightens the mood.
I really kind of went in with the thought of like, but they all know the song. You really want to have a lot of fun with it and have that come through in the track.
Yes, you want to have fun with it and have that come through on the track. Good. So that's recording day.
When we went in, we didn't know exactly.
This is more to do with the looping of the audio. So I'm going to just put a little looping section there. I don't know what to do with that yet.
So we walk in and all you can really hear is the sound.
So that definitely fits better over there because you walk in. Yeah, so this is some of the editing. yeah, I'm going to just go ahead with some sound effects now. He did actually include the boots. Okay, so what I'm looking for now is... So this chunk of yellow here is the stems for the track, the separate recorded parts. I can just overwrite that with this, and then we should be good. Yeah, there we go. Cool. Now, I've got them all synced up, which means we can unmute and mute as we go.
You really want to have a lot of fun with it and have that come through in the track.
Okay, take the rate down. Yeah, the boots. Now your question is, what are we hearing? What are we hearing? What are we hearing? Okay, that's a bit too long of a pause.
Through in the track.
And we've got the boots, so I can remove that.
A lot of fun with it and have that come through in the track.
And we can kind of fade that in.
So we walk in, and all you can really hear is the sound of cable being laid on the floor, and and your heartbeat as you're trying to think, okay, well, how do we want to go about what's going to cover a melody? Do we want to include some harmony over that? Are we going to have enough boots in the studio? Because I didn't even know what the floor would be at first. Would it?
Okay. So we've got a few things to do now. The idea I've got in mind is to push back boots. No, actually, boots works well, but then we have to loop it because it's too short. So let us take all of them and give them a loop.
Because I didn't even know what the floor would be at first. Would it be a concrete floor with carpet?
Okay,
would it be wood or linoleum?
Take the waveforms
and
so you can see where this one ends and try and keep it in sync. Look at the gaps between the stumps and try to keep it
studio, because I didn't even know what the floor would be at first. Would it be a concrete floor with carpet? Would it be wood or linoleum?
They kind of got synced. Now he also mentions heartbeat and wrangling cable.
So
I know we've got a heartbeat somewhere in a previous episode. Heartbeat. There we go. And I will source I'll source the writer of this heartbeat in the previous show's notes, which I've got written down. So here's a heartbeat.
At first, would it be a concrete floor with...
Oh, that is creepy. You can't hear it, but I can. Okay, there we go, good. So we've got a slight heartbeat here. Now we've got to probably crank this volume up, like, just to be able to hear it. Okay. That's the one thing you mentioned was the heartbeat sound.
You really want to have a lot of fun with it and have that come through in the track.
You really do. I agree, Stephen, but this is too loud.
How do you really want to have a lot of fun with it and have that come through in the track? And your heartbeat as you're trying to think, okay, well,
Okay, we don't need to include
you're trying to, and your heartbeat as you're on the floor, and your heartbeat.
Okay, I would normally sync these up to the boots, but because this heartbeat is going to be so difficult to hear anyway, being a low pulse, first let's rename that. Then I'm going to get an EQ on the heartbeat, which sort of just pushes up. We want to crank up the top actually. Okay, and we can
and your heartbeat. How do we want to go, and your heartbeat. We walk in, and all you can really hear is the sound of cable being laid on the floor, and your...
Okay, the sound of cable being laid on the floor. How the devil are we going to do that? So now I want a moment where we've got the sound of cable being laid on the floor. Let's just take a shot at free music, free sound. Cable lay, I don't know. is going to be very lucky if I get this. XLR cables, noise floor. No, that's going to be the... What's this? That could work, yeah. Yeah, that is something I will almost certainly do. Oh yeah, and the sort of air conditioner sound would be useful too. Oh yeah, okay, so let's go grab that and give the credit where it's due. Cable lay, doof. Sound design, go. Imported and downloads. I must say it's a lot more fun doing these, doing this work. I can delete the Chiranga because it's a lot more fun doing this work when you're kind of explaining how you do it. Makes you feel like there's someone else in the room who's maybe interested, or maybe it's of use to you, you know. Cool. Also, the time seems to go a little bit quicker. I've got to get out of here in about 35, 40 minutes.
You can really hear is the sound of cable being laid on the floor, and and your heartbeat. How do we want to go about what's...
Okay, I like that, except I've peaked out the EQ a bit, so it's...
want to go laid on the floor, and and your heartbeat. Sound of cable being laid on the floor, and and your heartbeat.
Let's do one at a time.
Cable being laid on the floor, and and your heartbeat. How do we want to go about what's going to cover melody? Do we want to include some harmony over that? How do we want to go about? Are we going to have enough boots in the studio?
I'm not going to use the harmony melody part.
Are we going to have enough? The boot stomps were really important. Really is a form of punctuation, an exclamation point at...
Okay.
Really is a form of have. Are we going to have enough? Are we going to have enough boots in the studio? Because I didn't even know what the floor would be. So the boot stomps were really important. Are we going to have enough boots in the studio? Because I didn't even know what the floor would be.
Okay, and this boot tapping...
We walk in, and all you can really hear is the sound of cable being laid on the floor.
So that doesn't actually make sense.
And, and your heartbeat. Laid on the floor. And, and your heartbeat.
Let's move the heartbeat up a little bit here. Crossfade.
And your heartbeat.
Now, what is this boot sound?
Are we going to have enough boots in the studio? Because I didn't even know what the floor would be.
Cool, now we're getting to
so the boot stomps were really important. Really is a form of punctuation, an exclamation point at...
Right, at this point I want to actually maybe fade in some percussion so it's clear that these aren't footsteps, these are something else. So I'm going to make a split. I think all of the percussion is there. Let's just do a group split and then enable those four.
It really is a form of punctuation, an exclamation point at the very start. I really wanted something that could maybe slightly startle the listener and really hit.
Yep, I'm going to unlink those two.
Of punctuation, an exclamation point at the very start. I really wanted something that could maybe slightly at the very start. I really at first, would it be a concrete floor with carpet? Would it be wood or...
Good, that's a bit of a stretch.
And
to understand.
we're very fortunate it's not. And so we could get some really good boot stomps in for the percussion. Are we going to have enough boots in the studio? Because I didn't even know what the floor would be.
I think this needs to go here.
At first, would it be a concrete floor with carpet? Would it be wood or linoleum? Would it be a concrete floor with carpet? Would it be wood or linoleum? And we're very fortunate it's not. And so we could get some really good boot stomps in for the percussion. So the boot stomps were really important. It really is a form of punctuation. Are we going to have enough boots in the studio? Because I didn't even know what the floor and your heartbeat.
Okay, so the boot stomps already
Really is a form of punctuation, an exclamation point. Because I didn't even know what the floor would be. Of punctuation, and I really wanted something that could maybe slightly startle the listener, and really.
Okay, so actually this here.
Really is. So the boot stomps were really important. It really is a form of punctuation, an exclamation point at the. Wanted something that
At
the very start. I really wanted something.
Okay, then I think what we should do when he says the very start, I think that is a good point to just these guys can move on up. I don't know why exactly. Okay, whatevs.
At the very start.
When he says the very start, what I want is
the very situation, an exclamation point at the very start.
okay, there's too much going on.
Exclamation point at the very start. I really want
these. Okay, let's see what's on.
exclamation point at the very start. Slightly startled. Are we? An exclamation point at the very start.
Okay, so now this whole thing is just coming a little bit too early. Move it back.
So the boot stomps were really important. It really is a form of punctuation, an exclamation point at the very start.
Okay, now it's just a little bit late, so at the very start should be where it kicks in.
Point at the very start.
Now let us also get these four. This
Punctuation, an exclamation point at the very start.
That's good.
I really wanted something that could maybe slightly startle. Are we going to have enough boots in the studio? Because I didn't even know what the floor would be. Would it be a concrete floor
That's
with
good.
carpet? Would it be wood or linoleum? We're very fortunate it's not, and so we could get some really.
But I actually want to sort of delay the full playback of the track until a bit later.
Linoleum. We're very fortunate it's not.
Okay, this linoleum part isn't really working.
Because I didn't even know what the floor would be. So we could get some really good boot stomps in for the percussion.
Okay, so he mentions boot stomps as percussion.
Of punctuation, an exclamation point at the very start. Really is a form of punctuation, an exclamation point. Credits of a TV show, when you see the first name of the credit, really wanted something that could maybe slightly start, exclamation point at the very start.
Oh, this is going on. It's a big part.
I really wanted something that could maybe slightly startle. Are we going to have enough boots in the studio? Because I didn't even know what the floor.
Okay, so I don't know if this segues very well from
Come through in the track.
I don't know if the boots part
So
segues very
we walk in, and all you can really hear is the sound of cable being laid on the floor. and and your heartbeat.
I think this cascade must come sooner.
Really wanted something that could maybe slightly startle. Are we going to have a
I know what to do.
startle the listener?
Cool.
Carpet, would it be?
Okay, the part about the carpet is not interesting.
Very fortunate it's not, and so we could get some really good boot stomps in for the percussion. Could get some really good boot stomps in for the percussion. Boot stomps in for the percussion. Boot stomps in for the percussion.
Boot stomps.
Boot stomps in.
Boot stomps in for the percussion. All right. Now, let's use this as the start of what I call the cascade, which is where you start to you introduce each instrument one at a time.
In the end credits of a TV show, when you see the first name of the credit and the first note of the song hits.
That's kind of what he was going for.
That could maybe slightly startle. End credits of a TV show, when in the end credits of a TV show, when you see the first name of the credit and the first note of the song hits.
Oh, okay, good. Next.
And so this was a melody that I had been picking around on the instrument, and it got stuck in my head, and so this was a melody.
Wait a second, how did we get you?
It was his daughter who was translating for people who came into the shop and only spoke English. And so this was a melody that I had been picking around on the instrument. You could still smell the sawdust in who came into the shop and only spoke English. And so this was a melody that I had been.
Okay. Now we're going to reiterate.
Let's
just get all the stems in here separately one more time. My trusty Standish Unwell theme. Curses we've got. There we go, that's better. Get all the stems over to here. Let's start the cascade. This was a melody.
And so this was a melody that I had been picking around on the instrument. And it got stuck in my head so bad that I'm like, this has to go somewhere. I don't write a lot of music for myself, so this was a really good opportunity to take that melody, and I really thought that it applied perfectly to the situation.
Okay, doesn't explain why, not that useful, so let's move forward. Okay.
So bad that I'm like, this has to.
Okay, so we've got two things here. One is there is a melody that's been played on the body and also I think on the viola. So let's get the viola up here.
This was a melody that I had been picking around on, and it got stuck in my head so bad. So bad that I'm like, this has to go somewhere. Perfectly situation. After that, we wanted to include even more percussion, particularly a little bit of hand percussion on top of the boot stomps. So we percussion.
Okay, so the melody must actually come later. So
for people who came into the shop and only spoke English.
That's the part
found a luthier who was the first thing that I even wrote for the track was on the charango when I was in Peru.
Because that actually kind of works. We've got this story about his melody.
More percussion, particularly to add a little bit of texture. The first thing, and so this was a melody that.
This goes here, that goes there, and now we're going to slowly start to look at things one at a time. First thing we want to do, so firstly there, we can, not new, we want to melody charango. Okay.
After that, we wanted to include
boot stomps.
Still smell the sawdust in the air of his shop, and he didn't even speak English, so I think it was his daughter who was translating for people who.
No, that's not it. It's
After that, we wanted to include even more percussion, particularly.
Okay. I've got the wrong. Okay, no, we've got the melody set up here, so let's put the melody over there and then switch this block to more percussion. So let's. There we go. That's all very quiet. Let's crank this up. That's better.
After that, we wanted to include even more percussion, particularly a little bit of.
Now let's keep the beats going while. So
You see the first name of the credit and the first note of the song hits.
1, 2, 3.
And the first note of the song hits.
Now at this point we can actually bring it all the way in. Okay,
Credit and the first note of the song hits.
Let's go and tick 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 tick. It's a bit soon. 2, 1.
Note of the song hits.
3, 4.
Note of the song hits.
Okay, let's keep the beats going. In fact, let's just take just the beats down volume to there.
Credit and the first note of the song hits. After that, we wanted to include even more percussion, particularly a little bit of name of the credit and the first note of the song
It's
hits.
actually cool that he says that.
After that, we wanted to include even more. After that, we wanted to include even more percussion, particularly a little bit of hand percussion on top of the stop
That's perfect.
so of the song hits. After that, we wanted to include even more percussion, particularly
Okay.
see the
note.
first name of the credit and the first note of the song hits.
Dun, dun, dun. I think we can do it like this.
First note of the song hits. Hits. After song hits.
I don't know which one's. Is it this one?
After that, we wanted to include even more percussion. After that,
Okay.
first note of the song hits. After that, we wanted to include even more percussion, particularly a little bit of hand percussion on top of the beat stops. So we threw in a little bit of egg shakers because they just happened to be in my guitar bag, and hand percussion just on people's own instruments. So it's just hitting a guitar.
Not sure about that. Is that the hitting the guitar? Okay, let's simplify it.
After that, we wanted to include even more percussion, particularly a little bit of hand percussion on top of the beat stops. So we threw in a little bit of egg shakers because they just happened to be in my guitar bag, and stops. So we threw in a little bit of egg shakers because they just happened in a little bit of. So we threw in a little threw in stops. So we threw in egg shakers because they stopped. So we threw in egg shakers because they just happened to be in my guitar bag. The beat stops. So we threw in egg shakers because they just happened to be in my guitar bag.
That's fine. Next, what's next? The melody will come back to.
Banjo, and that's Gunnar Jebsen. The next is banjo, and that's Gunnar.
I think the melody charango part should actually go forward in time, all the way to the melody. I think it might work better here.
Traditionally, it was made from it, and so this was a melody that I had been picking around on. I really wanted something that
Cool. Moving forward, the banjo. What is this?
to add a little bit of texture to that.
Okay, is it on?
It just happened to be in my guitar bag to add a little bit of texture to that percussion.
Cool. And then I think we've got a chance to do banjo here.
The next is banjo, and that's Gunnar Jebsen. And Gunnar,
The next is banjo.
the next is banjo, and that's
Banjo.
shakers because they just happen to be in my guitar bag. Add a little bit of texture to that.
restart. Once again, we have to restart. So let's get some fresh stems from here. Move them to there. So I take all of the stems at once and I move and I treat them as one track so that I can kind of drop them in and out, mute certain elements of it. This is the stem-based approach, which I find very useful for this show.
The next is banjo, and that's Gunnar Jebsen. And
That's the... Okay, we can kill that a little bit sooner.
Texture to that percussion. The next is banjo, and that's Gunnar Jebsen. And Gunnar is super Jebsen banjo. The next is The next is banjo.
4.
And that's Gunnar Jebsen. And Gunnar is super talented, and he went on to also engineer and mix other tracks for the show. And we gave him a lot of freedom to really do whatever he wanted on top of the melody. Also, Gunnar is super talented, and he Jebsen. And we gave him a lot of freedom to really do whatever he wanted.
Cool. Lauren guitar.
Kelly, a multi-instrument, really do whatever he wanted on top of the melody. We also had Lauren Kelly, a multi-instrumentalist who we started her on guitar when we really did the main instrumentalist. We started her on guitar instrumentalist. We started her on guitar when we really did.
Let's get both of these stems out.
We also had Lauren Kelly, a multi-instrumentalist. We started her on guitar when we really did the main melody together as a group. And then we went in and did some individual tracks with her, playing cello to add a really nice, lower piece to the track.
Okay, now he mentions cello, so we want to solo that out, but not yet. So let's try.
When we really did, started her on
guitar and then to cello.
And then we went in and guitar. And then we went in and did some individual tracks with her, playing cello to add a really nice, cello.
And then we solo. So we kind of not solo. We split those, mute those, fade these. Come on. Boom.
With her playing cello.
Let's end it. Oops. You and you can go, and let's end it just after the start.
Individual tracks with her playing cello. To add a really nice, lower piece to the track. And
cool, that works out nicely. Cool, the cascade is continuing. What I'm doing is piece by piece, I'm introducing the instruments that feature on this track, because I believe it brings a sort of a depth to the whole production. Here we go.
We brought in.
Now we're at the end of our piece, so we have to restart by bringing in some fresh stems. Here we go. What we mention now is Travis on the viola. So I'm assuming we're going to get these two soloed out.
Lower piece to the track.
And now let us
We brought in.
bring it over here to the track.
We brought in Travis Elfers to do viola. I really wanted to have strings on this and was glad that we were able to have that. I really wanted to have strings on this and was glad that we were able to have that for the Unwell. I really wanted to have strings on this and was glad that we were able to have that for the.
Yeah, I agree with you. I also really want to have strings on everything. Okay, Next up, Betsy. Betsy is a vocalist, so we're just going to move her. That's all we need from Travis, is just the mention of the viola and then Betsy on the vocals.
In the middle, Unwell theme. In the middle of the track, you hear this slightly dissonant voice come in.
Let's treat her as if it's a loop.
Unwell theme. In the middle of the track, you hear this slightly dissonant voice come in, and that's Betsy Palmer. You can give her.
Let's get a little bit of backup with that. Maybe they just need a. No, it actually is. It's a break, isn't it? What else is playing at the moment? Nothing. Just
in the middle of the track, you hear this slightly dissonant voice come.
Okay, they're back to us. In the middle of the track, right at the end there.
In the middle of the track, theme. In the middle of the track, you hear this slightly dissonant voice come in, and that's Betsy Palmer. It's Betsy Palmer.
And that's Betsy Palmer, and then he just says,
Sing it. It's a lot of fun to work anything, and she will internalize it and sing it. It's a lot of fun to work with her. And that moment was a really unplanned part of the song.
Okay, that's fine. She's really fun. And then lastly, so we're just basically paying tribute to all the musicians in a nutshell.
To work with her.
Work with her.
With her. I played guitar for the track.
Let's get Stephen's part. So now, for the first time, we hear what he's actually contributed to this recording. Oops, let's go back in time to there. Now we want to
Sit and sing.
I play guitar for the track. That's here and there. So now we can.
Which is the Palmer. You can give her anything and she will internalize it and sing it. It's a lot of fun to work with her. I played guitar for the track, which is the first, and that's Betsy Palmer. You can give her anything and she will internalize it and sing it. It's a lot of fun to work with her. I played guitar for the track, which is the first, I played guitar on the track, which is the first strum you hear. I played guitar on the track, which is the first strum you hear at the start. And I also added in a little bit of the trongo. Mel Reuter isn't just a recording engineer on the show. Mel Reuter is the recording engineer on the show and is most often present for the episode recording. And they came in and did some additional hand percussion for this track.
Okay. And then, so why don't we just use this
Palmer. You can give her anything and she will internalize it and sing it. It's a lot of fun to work with her. I played guitar on the track, which is the first strum you hear at the start.
Start to bring in
Mel Reuter isn't just a recording engineer on the show. Mel Reuter is the recording engineer on the show and is most often present for the episode recording. And they came in and did some additional hand percussion for this track.
Now I've done something wrong.
For this track.
Percussion eggshells, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the eggshells. There we go. Cool.
For the episode recording. And they came in and did some additional hand percussion for this track for the episode recording.
Okay, we just want to credit old Mel Reuter there, that's fine. Next up, we'll move the laugh to an area where it's not going to get canned. Okay, looping, I'm still not sure what to do there. Okay, we've got a few things to do still. We've got to add celery / jingle, multiple mics, piano, okay. So, well, that's some of the insight into how this process works. I'm going to sign off now and try and smash this out the park. So, yeah, thanks for stopping by if you stopped by. This is the editing of episode 81 of a show called How I Make Music, featuring a composer called Stephen Poon who writes for audio drama. He writes for a show called Unwell. And I'm taking his separate musical parts for the composition, and I'm telling a story with them. So this is dramatic audio editing. This is my field of expertise, turning otherwise average interest, sort of interview material, non-fiction, people talking, experts talking. I like to turn that into like interesting experiences featuring a lot of music and sound effects. So that's what I'm calling dramatic editing. So yeah, thanks for stopping by, and I will be streaming again quite soon, probably tomorrow when I finish this off. Peace out, and check out howimakemusic.com if you like the vibe of this show. Bye for now.